This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. Well, a big hello and a happy new year. It's been an exciting year, and we have no one but you all to thank for that. And as a way to kind of close out the previous year and embark on the new year of 2025, I'd like to peel it back a little bit and talk about the top 10 episodes for Body Bags over the previous year. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave Mack, Happy New Year to you, brother. It's going to be a great one, man.
You know, they all blur together after a while, you know? It's just... Of all of the shows that we have done over the last year, when you look at the top 10, Noah Presgrove, that story came to us from one of our listeners / viewers, people who follow you along on your appearances on network television. And she reached out and said, would you guys consider doing this?
This case deserved covering.
I think this is going to be a show we update fairly quickly because a lot is still happening. A lot of people have questions. How is it possible that a 19-year-old young man can be at a weekend party with friends, in air quotes, where they are spending a lot of time on social media posting pictures of him during the course of this party, and he ends up with the kind of damage to his body, found nude, dead in the middle of a road, and nobody knows anything. Joe, some of the injuries, give me the list of his injuries and what his autopsy had to have looked like for Noah Presgrove.
10 broken ribs, serious skull, neck, and spinal fractures, Dave. And he had internal bleeding. And, you know, as we've talked about previously, Dave, on Body Bags, internal bleeding is not something that is unexpected if you have a young man like this who's got fractured ribs. And you can have these fractured ribs that penetrate the lungs. You can actually have fractured ribs. I've worked cases where I've had fractured ribs that have passed through the dome, as they refer to it, the dome of the diaphragm, and go directly into the liver. And the liver is so vascular, you penetrate that, and you're going to have a belly full of blood at autopsy. So that when you make that initial incision, there's just blood pouring out everywhere. And it was a horrible death. This is not something that I would think would have been an instantaneous event necessarily. He may have very well lingered there. And I think that the condition that his body was found in, it's really telling about this impact. And I think that it is, and a major impact that he sustained would have been to the point where he would have had an awareness that he was hit. I just hope that his death was quick and merciful. But
you think he was hit by like a truck?
I think that there is a possibility, because you had to have been hit by something or pushed out. One of the things that in this particular case that the forensic pathologist has annotated here was the fact that he didn't have a lot of injuries to his lower body. And when you have a motor vehicle strike, first off, you're going to get, if you're hit by the front of the vehicle, we've talked about this before. I think we even talked about this in the Karen Reed case. You're going to get bumper marks on the body. So you'll have these kind of weird curvilinear marks that are around the lower leg. He doesn't have that. Then you're going to get what are referred to as rollover injuries, where the car actually, might roll over the body. It's literally as translated, and the body begins to spin underneath the vehicle. And then, if say the front tires hit the body, that starts a spinning event. They're bouncing, the body would bounce underneath the car, and you sustain injuries from those impacts. And then if you're hit again by the rear tires, again, that force is generating more and more trauma, and you're coming in contact with the surface of the road. I think that there's a high probability that he may have been impacted, perhaps as he was riding a vehicle, perhaps a four-wheeler. He does, in fact, have massive trauma to his brain. And again, like I'd mentioned with the ribs, when we get a skull fracture, those bits of bone in the table of the skull, they actually perforate the brain. And as we know, we talk about how vascular the liver is. The brain is even more vascular, and you've got these tiny vessels that just run throughout it, because out of all of the organs in the body, the brain demands the most oxygen. So it's, nature has a way of getting blood flow to those areas. And so you get those little tears in that tissue, the vascular elements of the brain, and you'll have a lot of bleeding. And so when, the skull is opened up, the pathologist is faced with this idea that there are a copious amount of blood that's just pouring out of the interior of Noah's skull. You're talking about severe upper body trauma,
right?
And here's another thing. Part of his scalp is also torn away.
Okay, can you tell me what the difference between torn away versus any other way it would be described if you had skin that was lifted off of the body of the bone? I mean, it just seems like this is such a very specific thing to be torn.
Well, a lot of that can be counted, I think, many times toward elements of a vehicle, like a rubber tire, perhaps. If the car actually, let's say he's riding on the back of a four-wheeler and he's impacted, or he's riding a four-wheeler and he's impacted, or he's riding in the back of a Jeep and the Jeep is hitting the rear, or in the back of a truck and comes out of that vehicle, then he's essentially cast off beneath the vehicle. And as you go under the undercarriage of that vehicle, these things are traveling at a very high rate of speed. And so just that energy alone, whatever solid surface that you can catch hold of, say like on the scalp, will literally rip it away. And you know how I've talked about before, Dave, with lacerations, how I say that lacerations are not the same as sharp force injuries.
Yes.
Because we've got, irregular edges. There's no clean margins. Well, this is a laceration. The only problem is that in a case like this, you're not actually going to have two sides to marry up to anything, because an entire bit of tissue is absent from the body. And so you would have these big patches, and I've had this happen before. I've had it happen not just on skulls. I've had it happen on shoulders and legs. I've had great chunks of thighs that have been ripped away. And a lot of that is coming in contact with a tire that passes over it, and it just kind of rips it away, tosses it aside, or tosses it to one side. I say tossing like it's an actual person doing this. It's not. It's just the physics behind it and where that winds up. And of course, what they're talking about here is that at the scene, they actually found clumps of tissue and hair laying out there in the road. I can't tell you how many late nights I've spent over the course of my career with a flashlight in hand, walking 2 and 3 abreast with state troopers and firefighters. And if you ever see people like that on the road, that's what they're doing. We'll walk abreast with flashlights, and we're looking back and forth to see if we can see any other evidence. And here's another fascinating piece to Noah's death, is that, Dave, they actually found multiple teeth at the scene laying out in the road.
Is it possible that some of the pieces they found in the road, the teeth and what have you, could have been manipulated by other people who found the body before the police were there? Could there have been a problem with this?
Well, I would, when the term manipulated is utilized, I'm thinking, well, manipulation can come in a passive form, like you move a body and things fall away. And that does happen. Then you can go, it's almost like sins of omission and commission. Then you can have people that have intent that are trying to muddy the waters, if you will, from an investigative perspective. I don't think that we're dealing with a group of sophisticated people here.
Right. And they were and they were intoxicated, right? I mean,
they were all just absolutely hammered out of their brain. You know, the cops, from what I'm understanding, believe that he may have been pushed from the back of a vehicle. I think my supposition here, though, is, Dave, is it possible that as a result of being pushed out of a vehicle, that he was consequently run over, you know, by another vehicle that followed in the heart of darkness, if you will, during that night, the nighttime? I mean, how many times have you been going down the road? And we'll ask our friends this too. Just think, how many times have you been going down the road in your own personal vehicle and it's pitch black? You can't even see your hand in front of your face if you didn't have headlights. And all of a sudden, you know, headlights only extend out so far.
Right.
And all of a sudden there's this blob that appears in the middle of the road and you can't avoid it. And I think in our own minds, our default position is never human. It's always dog, deer, maybe a wild hog, or a raccoon or something like that. And you don't think human.
Right.
Maybe that has come into play. But I'm like you. There's more to come on the Noah Presgrove case, and I'm waiting. The term silent killer is thrown around quite a bit in media, entertainment, this sort of thing. And even in medicine, you know, they talk about how hypertension is a silent killer, and it is. But there is an agent out there that has impacted our country so desperately, and not just our country, but around the world. And it is something that we have become all too familiar with. And this past year, we did an episode about this agent, and it came in at number 9 for our year-end count. And Dave, I got to tell you, this doesn't surprise me, because I think that some of the things that we found out, some of the cases that we covered, and one in particular two of the cases that are involved in this episode gained quite a bit of notoriety throughout the year, didn't they?
Well, you know, the episode was titled "The New Epidemic, Fentanyl," and the 9th most downloaded show of the last year. And you look at it, and you actually broke it down in a way that made good sense to me, because I really wondered where we were going to go with this. And you mentioned Corey Richens, the Moscow Mule woman, but you also mentioned the first actual trial conviction of a person who actually made a drug, made a pill and used fentanyl, and it killed a girl. And then we had the daycare in New York, which is still shocking to me. It boggles my mind what little bit you have to use. Now, to start this with Corey Richens, we know her as the Moscow Mule wife. She uses fentanyl to kill her husband, and it took her a couple of times to get it down pat. She apparently had been trying to poison him before, trying to get rid of him. So, which still to this day, Joe, please, for the love, just get a divorce.
Yeah.
Start your life over. I mean, come on. Do you really have to kill the father of your children?
Yeah. Why go to these lengths? And it's obvious that, well, first off, she didn't know what in the hell she was doing. And, you know,
I guess
I'm not here to offer advice on this end, trust me. But, you know, when you, you know, you see someone, and it's almost, this is the thing that's so disheartening about this, I think, with, you know, her poor husband, Eric Richens, is that she actually, it was kind of like an experiment she was running, Dave. That's the disgusting thing about it, where she was literally having to dial this in. And just so that we can reflect just for a brief moment, just indulge me, Dave, here. Fentanyl, it's in the news. It's still in the news day in and day out. This is it's in the opiate family. Okay. But this is not something that is naturally occurring. Okay. It's actually a chemical compound that falls within the opiate family. But the problem is that it's like, I think it's 100 times stronger than morphine, Dave. And if you've never been around morphine, if you've never received a morphine injection for things, I had a terrible abdominal problem at one point in time, and they gave me a bolus of morphine. I've never had that before. And Dave, I was feeling no pain whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I just slipped off into this kind of milky, syrupy kind of twilight thing that I was in. Wow. You think about that, and then you think about just a couple of grains of not grams, but grains of fentanyl can prove lethal in a case where this is applied. For years they were using fentanyl patches, and they were used for a localized pain control, I think, to get people through, surgeries and, problems, skeletal problems, muscular problems, these sorts of things. And then the people that were out there that had nefarious means about it, they said, oh, wow, if we can get our hands on these patches, people can, we can sell these on the street. And, they were finding people that had like 2 and 3 patches stuck to their body. With Corey Richins, the uniqueness of this, and we've actually seen this in the past with poisoners, Dave, for centuries. Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a very clandestine mindset that these people have, kind of, they're the ultimate silent assassin. And the thing about fentanyl, we've heard about people coming in contact with it, either passively or directly. Some of the things that terrify me, particularly when it comes to these young cops that I still teach 4 times a year at the police academy, is that they're going to open up a bag and there's going to be this big puff of dust that comes out. And this has happened. And they'll pass out. Some of them go into cardiorespiratory arrest, it's a dangerous thing. But, she allegedly found a way to weaponize this drug, Dave.
Can Narcan reverse the effects of fentanyl?
It can, but I would say that Narcan is probably not as effective with fentanyl.
It's that strong.
It is that strong. Yeah,
wow.
It's a tough hill to climb, and there's a number of reports that I've read over the course of us, covering cases where it says Narcan was administered to no avail.
Wow.
It didn't work out.
Okay.
I'm not saying that it's you throw it out. Okay. But what I'm saying is that fentanyl, that gives you an indication of how dangerous it is. And I understand why our friends would be intrigued by the Richins case, right, because it is so ultimately bizarre, but arguably that case was striking to me. But Dave, the one that really, I think for you and me, if you'll allow me to speak on your behalf.
Yes, you can.
Are these babies up in New York, where, and I'll say it, these idiots were storing fentanyl in the floor of the home. And you and I both have had little ones in our home for many years. Yeah. And what do babies do with their hands? Well, they explore the world with their hands. They're touching things. And can you imagine, you've got a child, a baby, that's crawling across the floor, this dirty, filthy floor in this apartment that's fronting as a daycare center.
Right.
And the baby happens to put that precious little hand down on the surface, that unclean surface. And what are babies going to do with their hand? They're going to take that hand and they're going to place it in their mouth. Now, another way that fentanyl can be ingested or taken up, if you will, is that under certain circumstances, it can be transdermal, which means it can be absorbed through the skin. Terrifying, right? Or like I mentioned with police officers, if you're just around, have you ever noticed, particularly in the summertime, when the sun is beaming through your window and you see that kind of rain of dust that's in the air? You catch that every now and then. Well, if fentanyl that they're storing there is in a histamine form like that, and you've got people stomping back and forth over that sealed area, guess what? That substance will rain up in the air and float about. Well, where are babies? They're down close to the floor. So it's hard to say exactly how these precious children ingested this insidious agent. It's not simply the addict that's utilizing the substance. Everybody in their circle, children included, can be subject to the effects of it. And people that just going about their normal everyday lives, you open up a trunk of a car that you've pulled over because it broke center line, if you're a police officer, and that puff comes up and it hits you in the face, and you might not be going home that evening. Well, Dave, that brings us to the 8th most downloaded episode of Body Bags for this year. And hey, you know what people always do with every new year? They make resolutions. And one of the biggest things that people resolve to do in their life is to get in better shape. That means going to the gym. That means working out and eating right and all these sorts of things. But I got to tell you, the number 8 case actually involved a bit of workout equipment. And I think that our friends found this episode particularly enlightening and interesting. If not, we wouldn't have had as many downloads. This is the
quadruple whammy, Joe, because actually it gave you the chance to tell us about a stretch of area in Louisiana that I was unfamiliar with.
Right.
You got to talk about shopping at Walmart and how that came into the actual breaking of the case. We got to talk about kettlebells as well as recording artist in a studio and Atlanta to Louisiana. This was a geographical nightmare of a story to tell that you were able to break down that actually ends with a married couple falling 10 stories and surviving the fall.
Yeah, that's quite remarkable, isn't it? We're talking about the title of this episode was "Married Couple Missing 3 Weeks: The Torture Death of the Josephs," and not Josephs like plural me, but Josephs is their last name, Lakeithia and Kenneth Joseph. And eventually their cause of death was, in fact, a drowning. But, Dave, this case in particular is intriguing by virtue of, the geography, obviously, and then the means. I don't know that we really covered a more bizarre case this year than this one. And we covered a lot of bizarre cases.
Yeah. And that's why I was, this was a story that as you were telling it, I was not familiar with the area. And for those of you who haven't had a chance to listen to, I'd encourage it. He gave you the title, it's Married Couple Missing 3 Weeks, The Torture Death of the Josephs. And it's a phenomenal story of a couple who's recently married and they end up being murdered. and it actually sounds kind of like a movie or an episode of a police show. But it would have to be a two-parter because there are so many twists and turns in this to go from, a recording studio in Louisiana to Atlanta and have rappers and vehicles and kettlebells all mixed together, Joe. Tell me what happened to Lakeitha and Kenneth Joseph? What happened to them?
Well, with both of them, they actually were taken to a location which goes over a rather substantial waterway in between New Orleans East, and you have to say it's not New Orleans. And it's not New Orleans; it's New Orleans East. That's how we say it, New Orleans East. And Chalmette.
How do you do it again, man? I got to do this right.
New Orleans East, yeah. New Orleans East, yeah, yeah.
I got it wrong.
So many people will say New Orleans. They'll pronounce it like that, and it doesn't matter what area of the country you come from.
I blame it on the band that had a couple of hits in the mid '70s. Orleans. Yeah.
No. But yeah, so this couple who had taken their shot, or at least peripherally, were involved in the music industry, and I think that there are a lot of people that are out there that have, designs on becoming musical stars and wanting to be involved in that environment. This case actually, started out in a recording studio in Metairie, Louisiana, which is actually my old jurisdiction. It's Jefferson Parish, Louisiana. So there was a fight that had ensued at a recording studio there. It was from there, the police believe that an attack actually took place within the recording studio because, as it turned out later, there was, in fact, there were bloodstains on the surface of the floor in the studio, and someone had made an attempt to clean these bloodstains up with, of all things, degreaser. That it's going to lift it out of there.
Doesn't work, does it?
No, it doesn't. You'd probably have a better luck with Dawn, more than likely. And that still doesn't work effectively. But Dawn is something, interestingly enough, we clean the morgue with. People don't realize that.
Why?
It does a great job on blood. And
oh, wow. So now we're doing commercials so we're not talking about Gilligan's Island and the other, Mary Ann, Dawn Wells.
No.
Wow.
We're talking about Dawn. Yeah. So, been using it in the morgue for years.
Is that what you use at home, washing the dishes?
Oh, yeah, I do. And I think about those days in the morgue every time I'm scrubbing a dish. But they had made some kind of attempt to clean the blood up. But here's the thing. The coroner actually opined that they were probably not dead at the studio. It was like an attack, okay? And they were taken to this bridge, which out in that portion, if anyone has ever driven into New Orleans on I-10, you go across what are referred to as the twin span bridges that are out there. And running parallel to the twin spans is Highway 90, the same highway that Jane Mansfield died on. And it's back kind of to the south of I-10. And there's a large high-rise road or bridge that goes over. So there's two cities, Chalmette and New Orleans. And the area of New Orleans that this is referred to as New Orleans East. And this bridge is rather high. What they believe is that two kettlebells were purchased from Walmart.
At 1 o'clock in the morning, by the way.
At 1 o'clock in the morning. And the reason that they were found out was that if you ever go to the sporting goods section in Walmart. Now, this may have changed some, but a lot of their athletic equipment as it applies to bodybuilding is actually supplied by Gold's Gym. It's an actual brand, and that's what these kettlebells were.
Wow.
So they were actually lashed to these kettlebells.
Kenneth and Lakeitha.
Yeah, Kenneth and Lakeitha, and they were tossed off of this bridge.
Okay. Just so I'm getting this right.
Yeah.
Kenneth and Lakeitha Joseph are attacked. They're tied up. They have kettlebells tied to their bodies. I'm guessing as weights to weight their bodies down.
Right.
They are then thrown off the 10-story bridge.
Yeah.
They survive the fall into the water. That 10-story fall did not kill them.
Yeah.
How did they die, Joe?
Yeah. Well, the coroner, and again, I think that this is as much art as it is science, because it would be very difficult to try to make a determination. But he opined that the cause of death was actually drowning. And that's amazing, because if you fall from a height, and I could tell your emphasis by what you were saying, if you fall from a height, and if it's 10 stories, you think, well, let's just be conservative and say it's each story is 10 feet in height. All right, you're talking about 100-foot fall. That water can become like concrete when you hit it, if you don't hit it just right. And I'm not of the opinion that anyone that jumps off of a bridge necessarily dies immediately. And I know that's very gruesome to contemplate. I think that they can be knocked unconscious, but that doesn't mean that life has actually left their body. Their brain is still functioning on one level, and they're going to breathe. They're going to try to take up oxygen. And of course, when you try to take up oxygen and you're in a liquid environment, what are you going to take up? Well, you're going to suck in that brackish water that flows beneath that bridge, and that's a mixture of salt water and fresh water, and you're going to have it all in your lungs. So you're going to be looking in the airway. It's not just to see if there is water present, Dave, but one of the things that is actually done is you're looking for what are referred to as diatoms. And there are these little bitty creatures. Their little skeletons are there contained within the sample that you're taking from the water. And that gives you an idea that you have an uptake of water into your airway. And so it's one of the ways that you can kind of verify whether or not someone was still alive, when they went in the water, and that would lead you to conclude that their cause of death, as was in this case, listed as drowning. And of course, this turns this into a homicide. So that brings us to number 7 on our list for this year's most downloaded episodes. And Dave, I got to tell you, I beat up a lot on dudes on the show, I think, many times, and moms who invite boyfriends into homes. And horrible things happen to children many times. It's something I'm not particularly a fan of. And that's simply based, look, I know that's not every case, but it's simply based on the fact that a lot of cases that you and I see, there's a boyfriend in the home that has, just done horrible things. But, we kind of flipped the script on this one. In this particular case, this is the girlfriend that has entered the home and, brought with her just pure unadulterated hell.
The headline, the title of it tells you everything, Joe. Number 7 most downloaded show. The monster is real. Dad's new girlfriend kills baby with nail polish remover. And by the way, nail polish remover, didn't even know it was deadly.
Oh.
But that's only one thing that this person did to that baby. This wasn't a one-time thing, Joe. she had been feeding an 18-month-old child the stuff of nightmares, getting her to ingest things that are not ingestible.
Yeah, I mean, and the least of these were 20 water beads, Dave, which are
water beads.
Yeah, and so they're these little things that that will dissolve in a bath, I think, and they've a soapy concoction, and you can take a bubble bath with. But then she graduated from water beads to, get this, Dave, 3 button-shaped batteries. Now, when I say button-shaped, I'm talking about the circular batteries.
The flat ones.
The flat ones that you might use in a digital wristwatch or whatever the case might be. Certain flashlights utilize them. And then finally, a screw, Dave. A metal screw. A metal screw that this child, and I have to wonder, was this a passive event, or did she hold her mouth open and jam it down her throat? That's the level of horror here that we're talking about. And I don't, you look at situations like this and you begin to think, dude, what kind of vetting did you do on this person? That you would entrust, in my opinion, and I'm kind of biased here. The most precious thing we have is our children, and they are God's gift, and to turn this child over, lock, stock, and barrel, to, let's face it, a total stranger. I don't care how many months you've been together. You're not going to turn over this precious child and entrust it to someone like this. And you can't tell me that there weren't signs leading up to this. In this particular case involving this precious little Iris, the agent that Owens chose here, as you had mentioned, acetone, is arguably one of the most painful ways someone can die.
What would that do to you, Joe? I mean,
well, one of the things that it's going to do is that it is you develop a condition called ketoacidosis, which is if people are treated for it early on, they can survive. But if it goes untreated, and unfortunately, many times, and this is not a dig against clinicians, you have a child that presents in the emergency room, and they don't necessarily think acetone poisoning. They think that the kid has got some other kind of metabolic thing going on. Maybe it's some kind of natural disease a child is presenting with, and they're trying to treat this. And the problem is that with acetone poisoning, which leads to ketoacidosis, is that if you do not begin treatment specifically for that early on in the trajectory of the treatment plan, it's kind of a lost cause, and it would be very painful. It'd be a horrible way to die. You get horrible stomach cramps, vomiting, diarrhea, blood pressure crashes, and eventually most people in this progression become comatose. And what happens is that you're going to go into, and this is really one of the things that makes this very insidious, is that you go into kidney failure, Dave. We're talking about an 18-month-old here that her kidneys completely shut down. And one of the ways they make the diagnosis is that they take a urine sample, and you're not supposed to have ketones in your urine. So that if ketones are present, that there's a problem back upstream that needs to be treated. But who knows when they're starting a shift and you're in the emergency room, that you're going to have a kid that has ingested or been forced to ingest nail polish remover. And unfortunately, it led to this precious baby's death.
In this episode, we've covered from number 10, the 10th most downloaded episode of the year, down to number 7. Tomorrow, we pick up with Number 6, as we head in, like doing the Casey case, on this year's annual countdown, it's a long-distance dedication from Joseph Scott Morgan in his studio in Body Bags World in Jacksonville, Alabama. And he's sending it out to everyone in his hometown of Nolens, Louisiana.
Well, we will be picking up with number 6 tomorrow, Dave. And in the meantime, keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching
for the stars.
I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.